Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Blake Shelton, Happy Anywhere, by Carol Cash Large. Foreword by Blake Shelton. Narrated by Erin Bennett. Foreword. Growing up in Ada, Oklahoma, with absolutely zero connection to the music industry made my dream of making it in country music feel like a crazy fantasy. Luckily for me, as a very young teenager, I met Larry and Carol Large, who also shared the same love for country music as I did. Even though we really had no clue how I was going to make it, we all believed somehow I would. These stories of our journey are directly from Carol's point of view. I wouldn't trade these times in my life for the world, and I hope you love Carol and Larry's stories as much as I love Carol and Larry themselves. I would still be roofing houses in Ada, Oklahoma, without them. Blake Shelton. Preface. You may ask yourself, why did Carol write this book? I have asked myself that question, and it boils down to the fact that I have always wanted to write a book. I did start one a few times, but never had my heart in it. Like I told students for years, write about what you love and know. I finally realized I had a subject others would enjoy that fit those two requirements as well. I love Blake Shelton. I know Blake Shelton. And about 5 years ago, I let Blake know that I was seriously considering writing a book about our lives with him. By that time, I had known Blake about 25 years. He was just a 17-year-old kid when, with his parents' blessings, we moved him to Nashville in 1994, 2 weeks out of high school. My husband Larry and I both believed he had everything it would take to be successful: dedication, talent, personality, and appearance, in that order. I would later add loyalty because it takes a little bit of time to realize whether or not someone possesses that quality. Blake has it all, and then some. So, I am presenting a variety of stories and successes, some inspiring, some unusual, but mostly funny, that we experienced with him along the way. I sincerely hope you enjoy reading about the many adventures we have shared over the years. Oh, and did I say, I love Blake Shelton. Carol Cash Large. Prologue. Ada, Oklahoma. It was a pretty rowdy place back in 1909, and one block in particular, where 38 murders took place in just 1 year, was known as the Bucket of Blood. Men were being killed over property rights, cow thefts, or scornful looks. One notable night, local folk had their fill of some out-of-town scoundrels who were being held in the city jail for murdering a man of the law. As those well-connected criminals were rumored to be living it up in their cell with steak dinners and cozy accoutrements, a couple hundred locals decided they couldn't stomach those obscenities any longer. They stormed the jail very early one morning, took the 4 accused men to an abandoned livery stable, bound them with baling wire, and lynched them. 2 years before Blake Shelton was born, Wellborn Hope published a book, 4 Men Hanging, The End of the Old West. That documented event later morphed into an interesting slogan: Ada, a great place to hang out. Times gradually changed, and the area surrounding Ada was booming during the early oil days. Fitztown, Oil Center, Fitzhugh, and others were having a ride on the black gold roller coaster, but in the end, their towns stayed small while Ada continued to grow. By 1976, Ada had become a cozy little university town where ranchers and oilmen from surrounding areas brought their families to shop or get a haircut, while teenagers chose to drag Maine, before that tradition bit the dust, or take in a drive-in movie on Saturday night. East Central University, ECU, located at the far east end of Ada's Main Street, was the hub of the community and the small city's largest employer at that time. However, according to the Chickasaw Newsletter, Volume 5, Number 2, 1976, the Chickasaw Nation held a groundbreaking ceremony for their tribal office's move to headquarters in Ada from Tishomingo, with few realizing the importance that held for the community. Blake would later work with Chickasaw Governor Bill Anatubby in efforts to boost the economy in Tishomingo, Oklahoma. ECU was primarily a teacher's college, and where my husband Larry and I received our degrees in the late 1960s and early 1970s. If you started driving west from there, you would first pass Thompson's Book and Supply Company and Perry's Laundromat, and then travel only a couple of blocks before crossing Mississippi Avenue to continue down Main. Ada's Main Street was dotted with mom-and-pop businesses like Folger's Drive-In, which had been around for 3 decades and was well known for their already legendary hamburgers. Many a day was spent calling in an order upon leaving work so it would be ready and waiting after that long, grueling 7-minute drive to the cafe. There was no need to get out of your car either, because Folger's was equipped with a drive-through window before drive-through windows were cool. When the line got too long, an employee or one of the Folgers themselves would simply look outside to see who was there and deliver their order. They would know what you ordered without asking because repeat customers were the norm. With Folgers guiding the way, Ada had more than their fair share of drive-through windows. Almost every restaurant and gas station in town accommodated customers by serving them as they remained seated in their cars. Another noteworthy addition on Main was the Juliana Hotel with its colorful history. Situated on the south side of the street, the long-standing rumor that it was a house of ill repute made it a magnet for a good teenage dare. Unfortunately, my daughter Patty was always up for a dare, so naturally she found herself in the lobby of the Juliana one Saturday night. She walked into a dark foyer to see an old black-and-white console TV playing to one odd man sitting and staring emotionless in front of it. She quickly went up to the counter and approached a woman, who could have been Dolly Parton's prototype for her role in The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, and asked, "May I use the phone?" The woman motioned to a phone at the end of the counter. Patty looked up and saw rooms, some with lights on, some not, made her fake phone call, and hightailed it out of there, fulfilling her dare. Continuing down Main past the barber shop with the red and white barber pole were Perry McGee Furniture, Campbell's Furniture, Anthony's, and Dillon's Department Store, where clerks were obviously paid commission because their employees followed customers around like little puppy dogs, pointing out good buys. The front porch was a children's boutique that actually sported a front porch facade, welcoming in the fashionable youth whose parents could afford the nicer clothes they stocked. Easter shopping became an annual event there for some moms on a budget and their kiddos. It was exciting to dress up the little ones in a special frock for that occasion, usually complete with a hat, gloves, and a tiny handbag for girls, or jacket and tie for boys. Since Ada was located squarely in the middle of the Bible Belt, Easter was a family event, if not a full-fledged Easter parade. Some of my cutest pictures are of daughters, Debbie and Patty, all dressed up in their once-a-year outfits. Older patrons had their favorite spots, too. One business-savvy gentleman owned 2 ladies' shops. The fashion catered to the trendy younger crowd, while more mature women usually preferred the smart shop a few doors down. It sported a curved, elongated, permanent canopy, and patrons felt a dignified ambiance immediately upon walking through the door. Purchasing a skirt and sweater or a dress there made for a good day of shopping. Right next door was Shipe's Shoes, where shoes lined all the walls, top to bottom and in between. They offered Buster Brown shoes for children and were equipped with a small kiddie ride and a state-of-the-art shoe size finder. Shoes for the entire family were available with one quick stop. And then there was Evans Hardware, where, strangely enough, future brides registered for gifts. It was far more than just a hardware store. There was a story that may or may not be true about Mr. Evans and Coach Elvin George, who was an outstanding football coach in Oklahoma, first at Ada High School and later at East Central University, and considered one of the most influential figures in Oklahoma sports history. It seems Mr. Evans was a big football fan, and he would go to practices and give Coach suggestions on who should play or what the play should be, that sort of thing. Coach never said much, but one Saturday he showed up at the hardware store wearing an apron and carrying a feather duster. He started dusting and making suggestions on how the store should be rearranged. Mr. Evans asked what he was doing, to which Coach replied something along the lines of, "Well, I thought if you could tell me how to run my team, I could give you some pointers on how to run your store." According to the story, they had a good laugh and remained friends, but the coaching suggestions ended. That could only happen in a small, close-knit town like Ada, Oklahoma. The First National Bank and Gem Credit Jewelers were also easily accessible right there on the main drag. Crossing Broadway Avenue, still headed west, was Bryan's Corner Drug that housed a pharmacy, costume jewelry, a makeup counter, and even a lunch counter at the back where junior high kids had standing orders and would manage to walk the few blocks from school, eat, and walk back in about 30 minutes. I don't know how they did it. Located catty-cornered across the street was Starship 10, a sort of nightclub for preteens and teens in the disco years. Patty still has her Saturday Night Fever blue satin tennis shoes and is still hoping to get them autographed one day by Mr. John Travolta, whose picture is on the box. S&Q Clothiers, Blacks, Men and Boys Wear, and EM Clothiers were conveniently located in the same vicinity to make shopping easy for the guys. Pete Edgar Jewelers and the McSwain Theater, where Blake would later earn his first $50 for singing, the last of the original 4 movie theaters still showing current films, were also popular businesses. In most of the stores, you could open a charge account, or at least put things on layaway. Also, it was not uncommon to take things out on approval, where customers were allowed to take outfits home and try them before purchasing, to decide if they really wanted to keep them or take the ones back they didn't want. The locally owned Katz department store was in the next block. Lots of women, myself included, still constructed some of their own clothing, and that seemed to be the best place to find quality fabric. Grace George, wife of Coach George, was my clothing instructor in college, and she preferred we shop at Katz for our fabric needs. 2 popular restaurants were Ada's favorite greasy spoons, Hamburger King and mom-and-pop business Liberty Cafe. Walking into the Liberty Cafe was like taking a trip back in time. There was a table set up in the kitchen, and when an older black gentleman came in to eat, that might be where he went. You see, during segregation, that was where the black patrons had to sit. But during that shameful time in our history, those segregated men became friends with the cook, who was also the owner. Now they didn't have to sit there, but they sometimes chose to, so they could have a nice visit with their friend while they ate. He would even cut up the meat for customers if they had a little arthritis in their hands. My father-in-law always headed back there for that extra courtesy. The cook's wife was a unique soul as well. It was not uncommon for a customer to place an order only to receive something not exactly right. If you complained, the common retort from her was, "Are you hungry?" "Well, yes, but..." "Then you'll eat it." Locals loved being treated just like they were at Grandma's house. It was those quirky little things that made Ada special and home to the 15,000 or so that lived there. Moving on past Rhines and Rhodes Furniture and Hudson's Furniture to the far west end of Maine was Blake's mom, Dorothy Shelton's hair salon, Beauty Unlimited. From ECU on the east end to Beauty Unlimited on the west end, Main Street was the heart of Ada. But as with any growing town, there was more. What wasn't located on Main Street could generally be found on Broadway Avenue, which earlier had housed the Round Bale Cotton Gin, saloons, and jail during the rowdy years. At the corner of Main and Broadway, if you turned south, you would find the Aldridge Hotel, Ada Fire Station, Ada City Jail, and numerous Protestant churches. If you turned north from there, you would go past the Ada Evening News and Bowie Ballard Ford. Past the car lots was J.D.'s Cafe, known for their pies, and Bob's Barbecue, where more than a few famous folks flew into the small airport a little farther north just to try the renowned cuisine. Through town gossip, I had heard that it was not always noted for cleanliness. Locals would say, tongue-in-cheek, "I don't care if my barbecue comes with a side of roach, it's just that good." My Patty loved Bob's. You would also pass the Indian Hills Motel with the 2-story dome-shaped restaurant appearing to have hopped out of the Jetsons. It looked like it should have rotated, but it didn't. And then there was KADA Radio, and the popular Shirt Nook, where you could depend on that unique smell from the presses that sealed designs onto the shirts. Almost anything you wanted could be printed on a t-shirt in nice block letters, or your favorite icon could adorn it with a rubbery likeness from those presses. It was a smell you never forgot, like the smell of donuts in a bakery, hot dogs at the state fair, or gasoline at a service station. Like Broadway, Mississippi ran north and south, the first busy street nearest ECU. Businesses on Mississippi included gas stations, fast food places, and the Village Inn, where Blake would learn to appreciate karaoke. But there were also Forget-Me-Not Florist and Wellington Photography where, if you could afford it, you got your senior picture made. Marion Fenton was located on South Mississippi just before you got to the Village Inn. It was there that Blake's dad, Richard Dick Shelton, sold cars. If you headed north on Mississippi and turned right at Ada's famous Crazy Corner, 4-way stop, you would have found yourself on Arlington Street. The Weehawken station on Arlington gave wooden nickels when you bought beer, so you could save them and trade them in for more beer. Farther out was K10 TV, an affiliate television station that also produced some original programming in its early years. They had the KTEN Ranch Hands show with Rocky Stone, and my husband Larry played drums and sang on that show. Continue down Arlington clear to the edge of town to find Valley View Hospital and the Oak Hills Drive-In Movie Theater, which was already in decline. It played B movies, but the speakers all still worked, and the concession stand wasn't half bad. Southeast of town was Wintersmith Park, with a beautiful lake and walking path, a monkey cage, peacocks, deer, a train ride, slides, a merry-go-round, a softball park, a lodge, picnic tables, a swimming pool, and a beautiful recreational area. P.A. Norris had donated 10 acres of land to the city of Ada for a park in 1933. During the Depression, young men had been given jobs through the government's CCC program to come to Ada and build the stone buildings, dam, amphitheater, and so forth, and the city continued to improve on it. Near Stonewall, 14 miles farther southeast of town, was the Ken Lance Sports Arena, where Blake would play in the future, famous for its huge rodeo every year featuring country stars who performed during the event itself and later at a dance. Ken and Ruth Lance had a wooden dance floor and a regular band, the Country Lancers, with Larry as drummer, but during the rodeo you could have caught Willie Nelson, George Jones, Barbara Mandrell, Reba McEntire, who was just beginning her career, and almost every charting singer of the day. It was almost a rite of passage to go to the dance and get to see a fight. The bouncers got them out of the dance hall pretty quickly, but fists sometimes flew. Everyone has a story. Ada, like Mayberry, on steroids, had a very small-town atmosphere. You would run into someone you knew no matter where you went. If you were driving, it was tradition to lift your pointer finger from the wheel as a way to say hello to anyone you met. It was a busy little town, friendly and over an hour from Oklahoma City, a little farther to Tulsa. In fact, no interstate highway ran through Ada, still doesn't. Townspeople referred to Oklahoma City as the city, the place to shop if you wanted to get something a little different from everyone else. And Except for the annual rodeo, you would have had to drive to the city to see a big concert. Elvis Presley made one of his final stops there in 1977, and I'm happy to say I attended it with my 2 daughters, Debbie and Patty. Yep, Ada was a typical Midwestern town, then and now. Chapter 1. The Baby. 1976. 6 months and 18 days into the year brought a typically hot, humid, and rainy summertime day in Oklahoma. All across America, everyone was in the midst of planning for the big bicentennial celebrations that were soon to come. Red, white, and blue semicircular buntings were hung from balcony railings, and flags were flying in front of almost everyone's home. Barbecue party invitations had been mailed, and kids were gearing up for a big day. A fireworks stand could be found on almost every corner, along with their sparklers, Roman candles, and black cats ready to light the night. A huge event was being organized for Wintersmith Park in Ada. Excitement was in the air that day, but it all came to a screeching halt for one family when Blake Shelton decided to make his debut. Parents Dick and Dorothy Shelton, an older brother and sister Richie and Andy, along with a passel of extended family members, welcomed the cute little boy with the big dimples and loud voice into their lives, with no reason to believe that his would one day become a recognizable name across the nation. His middle name, Tollison, came from his paternal grandfather, who didn't care for it as a middle name for himself or his grandson, and he later told him just that. His grandpa died when Blake was only 9 years old, but he still has his name and the little memory of how he got it from the namesake himself. In a small stroke of genius, Blake would later do something that would guarantee I could never forget his birthday. He added the line, "It's been 6 months and 18 days," into one of his songs. What I know about Blake's early years comes from memories relayed to me by family and friends. It is obvious from the stories that he hasn't changed a great deal. Even as a baby, Blake often went with his mom to work and quickly learned how to charm women of all ages. How could he miss with those dimples? I have several acquaintances who remember baby Blake hanging out at Beauty Unlimited. They reminisce about playing with him, even helping out by changing his diaper from time to time, and all agree that he was a pleasant child. The shop had a festive atmosphere, and one could probably hear Dorothy's hearty, infectious, one-syllable belly laugh, "Ha!" before walking through the door of her popular beauty shop. It was a great place to visit, and there were always several women around. One might be getting her hair styled for a Farrah Fawcett or Dolly Parton look, while others chose to emulate America's sweetheart, Dorothy Hamill, the Olympian figure skater who popularized a short and sassy look that took the country by storm. Others might be under the dryer, waiting a turn, or maybe just hanging out to play with Blake. Known around town as an Anne Margaret look-alike, Dorothy was not only beautiful but fun-loving, creative, and talented as well. Blake undoubtedly picked up those unique qualities from his mom. Blake's dad, Richard Shelton, known to everyone as Dick, was blessed with a colorful vocabulary, good looks, and a friendly demeanor, all combining to make him the perfect salesman. Tall and thin, with plenty of hair which would soon turn totally gray, he was an honest man, and almost everyone in Ada has a car story about him, either from buying one or from watching him race his own car. He simply loved cars. If Blake got his gregarious nature and creative talent from his mother, he definitely got his knack for telling a good story and classic good looks from his dad. The Shelton family lived in Lotta, southwest of Ada, and Blake dearly loved the space offered by being a little bit country and thus able to explore the great outdoors. He was drawn to fishing and later to hunting. He talks about those days with affection, how he explored every square inch of the property. He would wander around until his mother called him to the house from the front porch. The earliest pictures of Blake show him pretending to play a guitar, fishing, racing, and boating, all things he still loves today. Dorothy says he never met a stranger. Everywhere he went, he struck up a conversation with anyone close, young or old. He made friends everywhere he went. One of my favorite stories his mom shares is when he was 4 years old, and the family was next door at a cookout. After they had grilled and were ready to sit down to eat, not surprisingly, Blake was happily playing with a frog. When she handed him a hamburger, he proceeded to put the frog in his mouth so he could switch hands to eat the burger. I can imagine he would still do that today if he wanted to make someone laugh or just shock them. It would not faze him to stick a frog in his mouth for a good laugh. His mom also recalled a time when he was only 5 and participated in a pee-wee motorcycle race. Blake was wheeling around the course at a pretty good clip when he spotted a turtle slowly rambling across the track. He immediately stopped, got off his little motorcycle, moved the defenseless turtle to the side of the track, and got back on his cycle to finish the race, dead last. While he didn't win a trophy that day, he most assuredly won hearts. When Dorothy began taking Blake's older sister Endy, a cute little curly-haired blonde, to beauty pageants, she dragged him along. She had heard him singing in his bedroom, recognized some early skills, and entered him in a talent show when he was very young. The only little boy there, he was embarrassed and hesitated to do any more pageants. While Endy loved parading across the stage, making her turns and flashing a smile, all skills that would serve her well later as one of Ada High School's Cougons, a pep drill team, Blake felt a little uncomfortable with that. He liked the singing part, but the modeling not quite so much. It was his first experience singing in front of an audience, and it took a few years to get him to try it again. I first met Blake when he was about 11 or 12 years old, a typical Oklahoma boy with a mop of hair on top of his head, but cut above his ears and neatly trimmed in back. He still had chubby cheeks that any grandma or aunt would be happy to pinch, and the same deep dimples when he smiled that he has today. One day on Blake's bus, years after the fact, we were talking about Ada and talent shows, and I told him about entering Monica and Mandy Cash, my nieces, into a contest outside on a flatbed truck at Kmart when they were about 5 and 6 years old. We had worked up a pantomime to Coconut by Harry Nilsson. I dressed them in hula skirts, coconut bras, and leis. Mandy got to pantomime the part where she cried out in mock pain from the bellyache, "Doctor!" She held her tummy and opened her mouth really wide, giving it her all because it was her only part since her sister did the rest of the song. Mandy was a year younger than Blake and Monica, and small for her age, so she was pretty funny. They didn't win, but their performance was obviously memorable to Blake, because when I told him about it, he unexpectedly said, "I remember that. I was there." We still laugh about that memory from long before he actually knew me or either of them. Mandy is now a single mom to 2 children, Denver and Cameron Davison, and is a successful loan officer for a mortgage company. Monica, who ironically became Blake's first girlfriend, is married to Jeremy Walton, has a son Brody, and is a wonderful teacher and realtor. Blake attended Lotta Elementary School, one of several schools located in tiny towns surrounding Ada. Shirley and Alton Wood were among his teachers, and I later taught with both of them at Kanawha Public Schools, which is about 20 miles north of Ada. When Facebook came along, Shirley and I reconnected, and she loved to talk about Blake. He had been a pleasure to teach, and they remembered him fondly. Alton even showed up in a meet-and-greet line once and surprised Blake. They were clearly proud of his success. Dick and Dorothy divorced when Blake was about 9 years old. At first, he lived with Dorothy and later with Dick. But they still lived relatively close and were always equally supportive of all 3 of their children. They maintained a friendly relationship with each other as well as the new spouses each later brought into the family. When Blake transferred from Lotta Elementary to Ada Middle School, he met his first girlfriend, My niece Monica, a feisty little blonde who fell for him not because he was a hunk, but because she thought he was hilarious. They were maybe 12, puppy love. I'm sure, in an attempt to impress, he recorded a tape for her that covered...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?